My friend came up to me the other day and he told me that the power company had to cut down a tree on his property, and he asked me if I wanted some of the logs. Of course, I said I was interested, and that I would go out and take a look at them. Whenever I got there, it was a nice big oak tree that they had to cut down. So I packed up as much as I could take and I headed home. Naturally, I was quite excited by this. So on the way home, I was about as giddy as a schoolgirl.
So whenever I got home, I sealed the ends of the logs. This just helps prevent cracks and checking as the logs dry out. I see a lot online that people use anchor seal for this, but I just found this wax emulsion stuff from Lee Valley, and I used it just because it was cheaper. As you can see, the average diameter of these logs was about 14 inches.
One of the main tools I used for hollowing this out and just roughing it out as well was this variable bowl gouge that I got off Lee Valley. It has a 40-40 grind on the end of it, and to be able to do that, I just posted another video in the comments where I learned it from. I also use this little 1/2-inch skew since I don't have a bigger one, and I just used it for rounding out the bumps on the outside. And as my wife likes to say, it's not about how big it is, it's about how you use it. Wait a sec. For cutting out the logs, I just have this little Black & Decker 14-inch chainsaw. It's electric and it's corded. It was the cheapest one I could find. And the lathe that I'm using is a Rikon 70-150 VSR, and the maximum you can turn on that is a 14-inch diameter bowl. That's if you have the bed extension and you're turning on the outboard, which is what I'm going to try to do with this.
So now I just wanted to draw a circle on it just so I could start roughing out the blank. To do this, I just used a piece of cardboard and I put 2 holes in it about 7 inches apart since I'm going for a 14-inch diameter bowl. I've used string before for this kind of thing and it was not convenient. So I found this method a little bit better. Three things to make note here. 1, fire the cameraman. 2, don't wear rings in your rotating equipment. In case you didn't notice, I still have my wedding ring on. That's a big no-no. Just look up what degloving means if you need more motivation. 3, don't turn a bowl backwards. By this, I'm talking about the direction that the bowl is spinning. In the manual, it even says that when you're turning on the outboard, you should reverse the direction of the lathe. This is just to keep the bowl always spinning counterclockwise. And the reason for this is because to thread the blank and the faceplate onto the headstock, you need to turn it clockwise to tighten it. So as your tool engages it, if you're spinning it clockwise, then it'll start to loosen off the blank, and then you can get an unscheduled dismount, which isn't good. Thank goodness I'm such an intelligent and observant person, and noticed the error of my ways, and stopped and actually did this the safe way. Just kidding, I did the whole bowl backwards. Just chalking it up to a lack of experience or a lack of competence, or a little bit of both. I didn't get very much footage of actually hollowing out the first bowl that I made, so this footage is all from a different bowl, but about the similar size. And I actually turned it the right direction too, so that's good practice. Whenever you're doing the final cut, you want to make sure your tool has just been sharpened so that it makes it have a better finish and you don't have to sand it as much. Doing it on this rim was probably the most difficult part because there was so much air gap. I was getting a little bit of friction on the tool rest, so I buffed it off with some steel wool, and then I just put some tool wax on it just to make it slide a little bit better. Now that the shape of the bowl is done, it's time to start the drying process. You don't want it to dry too quickly or else it'll crack. And one way to help deal with this is called the paper bag method, where you put it in a paper bag with its own wood shavings, and that keeps the humidity higher. I didn't have a paper bag big enough, so I just used a cardboard box. And they say to keep it in the bag for about a week. Since the wood shavings are so wet, any bare steel surfaces on your lathe are going to get rust if you don't clean it off right after. I use brake cleaner for this, and then I put a little bit of tool wax on as well. And now just to clean up the rest of the shop.
So after sanding it all down, this was the final product, and I ended up putting 4 coats of shellac for this first bowl that I made. As you can see, this one dried a little bit quickly, and then it caused some cracking, especially up around the top parts. Those go all the way through to the inside as well. But overall, it wasn't too bad. And I like the shellac coat on this because it's a little bit warmer than a clear top coat, and it's also food safe, so people can put fruit and stuff inside of this. The only potential issue I can see with the shellac is that if it gets water on it, I believe it'll leave, if it's not wiped off right away, I believe it'll leave a white spot. So that's just one thing to be aware of for that. I ended up making 2 other ones as well, but just in different sizes. So this one I made a 6-inch diameter, and then this one I made a 10-inch diameter. And these 2, I ended up doing a top coat of min wax polyacrylic, and I did about 3 coats of that. This one is also food contact safe, I believe. For this 10-inch bowl, I didn't want to have any of these cracks that I got on the first one, and I also turned it thinner, so I was more concerned with it cracking. So I ended up leaving this one in the wood shavings for quite a while, and I was expecting it to grow, to get some mold on the surface. I was fully expecting that. And then my plan was to just sand it off, and that would hopefully get rid of all the mold. One thing I did not think to account for was the size of the grain on the actual wood itself. I believe the grain on this oak seems to be quite large. Even whenever I was blowing it off with the air compressor, whenever I had it facing
parallel to the grain, I could feel air on the other side whenever I was blowing through. So that just shows the size of the grain. So there's a lot of space there, a lot of air there, and that just allows for much more mold to grow in the pores itself of the grain. So no matter how much I did sand it, I couldn't quite get the little black mold specks out of this one. You can see that whenever you look at it, which isn't quite desirable. But I didn't get any I didn't get very much cracking at all on this one, except a tiny little one at the base. So I'm pretty happy with how that one turned out, and also with the shape of this one. And since I lack any form of self-control, I ended up making 4 more bowls. I made one more 6-inch diameter one. This one still has the tenon on it. I made another 10-inch diameter bowl. And one interesting thing to note, if you've ever turned anything green before, you've probably heard that one of the most important things is keeping a consistent thickness for your bowl, so that when it dries, it's less likely to crack. And this one's a perfect example of that. This one I lost center on for whenever I flipped it around, and I had to return the gusset, or whatever the hell. I had to return the little hole part where I mounted the chuck. And I lost center, so this side is a lot thicker than this side. And as you can see, there's a lot of mold on the bottom of it. So this one I was trying to make it dry as slowly as possible, but even with that, it still had a huge crack on the top and bottom. I think I can still salvage this. I might end up putting some epoxy or something in between and then just finishing it that way. However, this is something that I would have liked to avoid doing. One interesting thing to note about this one is there's a reason why people try to avoid the center of the tree or the pith, because that spot is a lot more likely to crack, and which is exactly what happened on this one. You can see the center of the tree right here, and there's a huge crack going right up and down it. It doesn't go all the way through to the bottom, so I'm not too concerned, but that's just something to note. Overall, I'm pretty happy with how these turned out. I still have to finish these 4, which I'll get around to eventually. If I was to do this all again, I would probably do a twice-turn bowl just to avoid the mold issues that I ran into. One of the benefits of doing just a once-turn bowl, or what I see as a benefit, is that as it dries, it warps a lot, and that can add a lot of character to the bowl. However, I find it's very difficult to tell if these are warped whenever you have a live edge on them. So I don't feel like I'm getting any benefit from it warping. Anyways, thanks for watching. My name's Scott, and I'll see you later.